Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We are jumping headfirst into our first conversation, and we are pleased to say that we're joined this morning by historian, also former ambassador Assad Shoman. He is here to discuss the current conflict that we have been overseeing, also highlighting in our news spaces, not only here locally but internationally. That is the conflict between Iran and Israel. Most recently, we've also been dialoguing and highlighting the United States' role in this as well. And so this morning, we are giving Mr. Shoman an opportunity to engage with us and also allow you guys to learn a bit more on this conflict and potentially how this could affect Belize as well. Good morning, Mr. Shoman.
Good morning to you and to your listeners and viewers too.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine, thank you.
The last time we were here, we were speaking about the conflict with Israel and Gaza and how Hamas is involved in that as well. Before we even highlight what is currently taking place, because I know that in just a matter of 48 hours, there's been deeper conflict taking place where the United States got even more involved, and then a ceasefire, and then a violation of a ceasefire. But since the conversation that we had about a few months ago, is there any connection between what was taking place with Hamas and Israel and Iran's involvement?
Well, there's a complete connection. Yeah, complete connection. And I mean, you have to understand, you have to frame this thing historical. You said we want to look at history, right? Yeah. So it's all about, in my view, it's all about colonization and decolonization. So that the state of Israel was born at a time when, just after the Second World War, remember, it was the beginning supposedly of decolonization. Mm-hmm. When all the countries of Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, year by year became independent. That same year, a colony was created. Europeans came from Europe, settled on the land in West Asia, right, in Palestine, and then drove the people out after a campaign of terror, terrorist attacks, murders, mass murders, and established that state. And since then, everything else that has happened until now is playing out that colonization and the resistance to that colonization and the attempts at decolonization.
So I love that you painted that backdrop, Mr. Shoman, because what we are looking at currently, most recently, was a ceasefire where Iran and Israel expressed that they would essentially stop what was taking place, what looked like the emergence or the start of World War III, as some people are calling it. Since then, there has been missile attacks, and we also heard from President Trump just about a few hours ago via his social media platform saying that there was violation that took place concerning that ceasefire. In regards to the United States involvement, what contextualizes the U.S.'s involvement? Is it simply a power move for ammunition to support Israel, or is there a deeper interest there?
When you say the U.S. involvement, you mean this?
In the war itself, we also
immediate attack on
the
Iran.
Nuclear plant. Yes.
Well, I mean, the Israeli state has for years painted Iran as the big enemy, right? Because Israel, don't forget, has been able to maintain itself as a settler colonial state, as an apartheid state, right? By defending itself, so to speak, you know, that word defense, really attacking its neighbors, picking off quite easy targets. So that, Israel is known also as the assassination nation. Remember how they got to Hezbollah? By assassinating the leadership. How they started this? By assassinating top leaders, and they've done it all over the world. Mm-hmm. And they have helped to do it all over the world. Importantly for Belize, if people who are interested in history, they were doing it with Guatemala in the 70s and 80s, right? They armed the Guatemalan military, they trained them and told them, you must do to them Indian like we do to the Palestinians. You know, these are things that are on historical record, right?
Yeah.
So they've been used to doing that, right? And suddenly now, That's not happening. They decapitate a large part of the military leadership, the scientific leadership, but then they start getting pounded. For the first time, really.
From Iran.
From Iran, right? So there's a retaliation, there's a defense, a real defense. Because what Israel did was an unprovoked attack, totally unprovoked.
They're saying, though, that they're trying to destroy the nuclear plant that they claim Iran has been putting together all these years. And, quote unquote, they were so close to achieving the completion of this nuclear plant to be able to achieve mass destruction.
All right, but don't forget that this happened in the middle of negotiations between Iran and the United States of America in order to control that nuclear situation, right? And in the middle of that negotiation, just before, 2 days before the next session, they attack, they decapitate the leadership, they try to kill the head negotiator, as they had done in Lebanon, as they did in Palestine. You know, that is their modus operandi, to terrorist attacks and assassinations, and of course, mass murder of civilians. So I don't know what the count is. Have you heard, like over 400, right?
Yeah.
Mostly civilians killed in Iran.
I'm not familiar with it. In terms of Iran, the strikes on Iran?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much of this conflict between Iran and the US, based on your understanding, has to do with support for Israel versus the US looking after its interest in the Middle East?
I think it's mostly to do with support for Israel, the actual military situation, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, they have been able to negotiate with Iran all the time. Iran has always been willing to. Iran has been a part of this non-proliferation treaty. As you know, what was it, in 2015, 2016 with Obama? They signed a treaty which they have been following. Everybody in the world that monitors this say, yes, they have been following that treaty. They have been complying. And then the United States withdrew from that and started punishing, really serious sanctions that made people suffer and so on. So that was done always at the instance and at the push of Israel. In fact, some people were amazed that Israel dared to defy the US, which was in negotiation, talking to these people, and then you go and bomb them and try and kill the top negotiator. So it seemed very odd, but I believe Israel was forcing the hand of the United States, and it successfully did that.
Yes.
Because, as you know, the Israeli lobby in the United States is very, very powerful. It controls the members of the House of Representatives and of the Senate.
Within
the U.S.
In the United States of America.
Why is that?
Yeah, that's
because
what I was
it's
asking.
the money. So for example, you've heard of a couple, I forget their names, a couple of Democratic candidates who were to run in primary to represent the Democratic Party in Parliament. And they had made statements in favor of Palestine, right? Or against the genocide or whatever. And Israel, the Israeli lobby in the United States, which is several organizations, the main one is one called AIPAC, they funded contestants to those on the other side, or contested that, and they won. So that the person who is now, or two of them in this case, who is now in the House of Representatives is a direct result of this lobby. But almost all of the representatives. If you remember when they declared war criminal, the Prime Minister of Israel went to the United States of America, a wanted man internationally, and addressed the what they call it, the
Congress?
The Congress, the two joined together. The man could hardly speak. He had to beg them, please stop. They were clapping. Every minute they stand up and clap. I think it was over 50 standing ovations. Whatever he said, they would get up. And there's a famous line where he said, please don't clap. Listen to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that gives you an idea of how much that... a man who is committing genocide, who is wanted by the criminal code, appears before you, and you can't let him speak because you're clapping.
Wow.
It sounds weird. It's very weird. But that shows to you, that proves to you, that tells you in visual form the power of the Israeli lobby in the United States and in the United Kingdom, don't forget, as well.
Based on your understanding, how long has Iran's intent or actions to build up its military strength and resilience, whether by men, women, or weapons, otherwise, how long has that been in the making, and how great of a concern has that been for the Middle East over time?
I believe that whatever Iranian attempt to arm itself and to be able to produce a nuclear weapon, although don't forget, let's make it clear that they had no intention to build a nuclear weapon, as far as even the United States intelligence community is concerned. Remember, in March of this year, in a statement to Congress, the head of that intelligence service says there is no indication that Iran is building a nuclear weapon.
Yes.
Nor that the supreme leader has changed his order not to build a nuclear weapon.
But then we also heard directly from the president of the U.S. saying, look, I disregard that. We believe what we believe.
You heard that, yes.
One of the things I want us to, and perhaps it was already covered, but just to paint a clear picture as possible, Mr. Shoman, the conflict with Israel and Iran, you stated, goes all the way back to colonization and decolonization. But when we look at it in more recent times, it could also be considered an alliance of the two. Iran perhaps supporting Gaza and what is taking place with the people of Palestine, and of course Israel being their enemy in this case, the United States supporting Israel. Could this also be another, I'd say, factor in what is causing this deep, intense war that is taking place and conflict?
It's absolutely the factor. You put your finger on it. That is what it's all about.
So with that being at play, and now we know now that there are these nations that are willing to put their money where their mouth is. We've seen most recently what the United States has done. We also know the role that the United States has played in supporting Israel. My understanding is that Israel did not have the war weaponry needed to destroy the nuclear plant because of its placement underground. Could this mean then that the United States has more power than we actually think they do? Because you've expressed the Israel being very influential in the dynamic of the United States. But I would also say the US has a lot of power, because Israel would not be able to achieve what they would want to without the United States machinery.
Oh, the United States has all the power. It has had it for a very long time.
So it's
right?
Perhaps more interchangeably.
More
interchangeably, where the Israel has influence, but United States has the money.
United States has the power, right? Has the power. So at any time, remember now, we hear the word ceasefire now, and we say, right, that ceasefire, Iran, and this is the first time that Israel is meeting any opposition to its barrage of assassination and mass murder, right? It is very good. Its army is wonderful at killing civilians. Hundreds of thousands of civilians, children, at starving little children and babies and women. It's very good. But now for the first time it meets an adversary that can respond.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And then what does it do? It cries for a ceasefire.
But I'm sure...
You can't take it.
But I'm sure for you, where do you stand on all of that, though? Just want to get your sentiments on all of that. The loss of lives, the destruction of homes and the uprooting of people's livelihood. We're not there, so we don't understand the reality.
Right.
Standing on the ground, looking up, seeing buildings, children on both sides from both countries, mothers mourning. Where do you stand?
It's not so much on both sides. It's really very one-sided.
Yeah.
It's very one-sided. It's the people of Palestine, and particularly of Gaza, but more and more of the West Bank, what they call the West Bank. Don't forget that. There are a lot of pogroms going. You know what a pogrom is, right? Pogroms against the civilian population. They have no excuse there. They don't look for an excuse. They say the stated aim is to take the territory. Their aim from the time it was founded, the entity called Israel, from the date it was founded, it said so clearly that they have this biblical justification for wanting to take over the entire territory. And they want territory but without the Palestinians. So their goal has always been to exterminate the native.
It's so
to get rid of
interesting.
them either by murder or by expulsion.
It's so interesting that you say that, Mr. Shoman, and for me, because I'm trying to follow as many media platforms as I possibly can, you would also know that when it comes to this war and all the parties involved, certain media outlets are going to give you skewed versions of what is taking place. I've seen in a media outlet where the president of Israel essentially said that they are not there to target the civilians. They are not trying to hurt the people of Iran. They are seeking to destroy the regime that is existing over in Iran, that is suffocating, stifling the people.
Does that sound familiar to you? So in other words, they were saying in Gaza, we are not hurting any civilian. We're targeting Hamas,
The regime.
terrorists, and the regime. Our intention is not, and we are not, because we have very precise weapons, we're not killing civilians. I mean, who believes that anymore? Or who even pretends to believe that anymore? Because for months and months, Western media, Western leaders pretended at least to believe what Israel was saying. They can't anymore. It's so obvious. I mean, they have different ways of luring civilians. First, they did it by saying you have to evacuate this area, go to that safe area. That safe area is bombed. They tell them go somewhere else. They move them from place to place. And now they found a new way of doing it. Putting them into pens and saying you're going to get food here, we're going to give aid. And they start shooting and killing them.
Would you say that
So
the president is the winner in all of this?
Who is?
The president of Israel?
Is the winner.
He gets the boast.
He has been able to survive. He was able to manipulate the situation so that he lured
Certainly.
the United States into making that attack, right? However, that attack was not, I mean, it was a kind of coordinated attack, wasn't it?
And they said it took months to
Yeah.
organize.
But I mean, they sort of let the Iranians know that they were coming, what they were going to do, and the retaliation. Iran paid back the favor. We say we're going to hit that such and such a base. They were able to evacuate it in time. So it was like a show of support for the Prime Minister of Israel, in return for which he demanded a ceasefire. Right? Well, remember I was saying the word ceasefire comes easy to our mouth now, but a few months ago it was illegal almost to say that word in the United States of America. If people called for a ceasefire, that sounded like they were terrorists.
That's true.
Right? You remember that?
I mean, even...
And it's still happening, really.
I just want to say, even to today's date, there are certain positions that are frowned upon when you take it publicly in the U.S., right?
That's
certain
right.
The many protests.
So to say ceasefire in relation to the Gaza, you're a terrorist almost.
The world was watching, and with great concern when the U.S. got involved in this conflict over the weekend.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Do you think it's a possibility that this could reignite conflicts at an increased level across the Middle East?
It could, yeah. I mean, there's that possibility, of course.
How would that look based on history?
It would be terrible. For the people, especially there, in West Asia, but for the world as well. I mean, for the economies of the world, you know. So that any retaliation by Iran, for example, they were talking about closing the Straits of Hormuz and so on.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think Iran would do that very easily or very willingly, because it realizes the impact that would have
On them, right?
on them, yeah, but on the world and on the United States. I mean, it would be crippling. And of course, the United States would have to respond the only way it knows how, which is militarily, right?
Yeah.
So they don't want that.
And that's what I initially thought would.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
when you consider the possible outcomes, you could think of
That
a
was a
more
big fear, yeah.
passive approach and a more aggressive approach, where
Right.
there are, firing of missiles across real world war taking
Right.
place. But I think we also have to consider that there are other ways economically that world war
warfare.
could also
Yeah,
take
absolutely,
place,
absolutely.
and that not only impacts the United States but other regions as well.
Everybody.
Belize
Absolutely.
included.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so talk about that then. What do you understand to be the economic influence that this part of the world, or the economic hold that this part of the world, that part of the world that is, has on the entire world, the entire globe? What fuels that? Perhaps no pun intended, because is it oil?
Right. Well, it is to a large extent. I mean, that is the thing that up to now, everything depends on virtually. I mean, although we know it's so destructive and it could lead to the end of the world, really.
Yes.
We insist on depending on that more than anything else. And therefore, it has that power hold, right? But I come back to where we started. That all of this has to do with the reordering of the world in terms of colonialism and decolonization. If you step back a little bit more, right, and find that since the 16th century or so, there has been a move of globalization and a move of domination of the world, of, if you like it, the North or the South, if you like it, the whites against the non-whites, whatever. You know, and that has held up to now. From then, Europe and the spawns of Europe. I mean, because United States is what? I mean, United States is English people, most is going there and then creating that whole transatlantic slave thing.
Yeah.
Another genocide that the United Kingdom is responsible for, that the United States is responsible for, the slavery.
Yeah.
That was a genocide, you know.
So was
And-
the people of Israel, and there seems to be
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah.
soft spot for the anti-Semitic situation there. And it's so interesting, Mr. Shoman, because it's something I've been thinking about, but I haven't found a way to express it as a possibility of where that soft spot could be for Israel as well. When we think of United States and the way that racism has shown itself, where when we look at blacks and slavery and how that took place,
Right.
and when we look at the genocide that took place with the people of Israel, there still seems to be a separation of the two, where it almost seems like people are more empathetic to what took place took place with the people in Israel versus to the
Sorry,
people
what's that?
People in Gaza.
What you're talking about, the people in Israel? Which genocide?
Gaza.
in Gaza, or whites and blacks in general. There seems
Right,
to
right.
be a soft spot for these people versus
For the
what
Jewish
took
people,
place.
you mean?
The Jewish people.
Because of what you're saying? Because of the Holocaust?
The Holocaust, racism, I'm looking at it all. When I think of what is taking place right now with Israel and the alliance we've been speaking of, the power that the United States has and the possible interest that is
Right.
involved. But when we were taking it back all the way to decolonization and
Right,
slavery,
right.
can there be a connection with just the soft spot that the United States could potentially have for color even?
That is something you and I have to sit down over a cup of coffee and talk, because it's very profound. I don't quite understand what you're saying. But what I think maybe comes close to what you're talking about. Let's look at the Holocaust. What happened there, right? What happened there was that you had a regime in Germany You had a German state carrying out something. It wasn't an individual. It wasn't one or two people. It was the state of Germany carrying out mass murder of Jewish people, right? Some say up to 6 million people, maybe more, right? What was that all about? What was that? That was racism, right? Racism. And many people have done studies. Where did the leaders of this German state, where did they look for examples of how to treat the Jews first, how to segregate them and so on, housing, whatever? They looked to the United States of America, to what they now call the Jim Crow laws. The anti-black laws that dominated the United States of America right into the 60s. Laws, I'm talking about not just actions, written as laws, right? And they look to that as examples of, so that's why I want to bring us back to the root of all this. A lot of it has to do with colonialism and racism.
That's
what
where
you're
I
saying,
was.
What
That's
you're
where I
saying
was.
is that, but based on my understanding just from the entire conversation, it's about people and power, right?
Yes.
And people wanting power and powers shifting and people and I mean nations finding ways to gain control of that power.
Of their own destiny, right?
Right, whether momentarily by way of firing missiles or long term by way of creating forces and armies and resources that are permanent and mainstay to say, hey, we got this.
Right.
So but it's about people and power at the end of the day. I think that's a good title for a book. So but my question,
you write it, yeah.
My
With help
question
from
here,
my friend.
my question here is that Belizeans, we spend a lot of time looking at the US media for information, and we can agree that in some cases some of these reports, a lot of them are biased to either one side or the other. My question to you is, why should we as Belizeans care or be interested in what's happening between Iran, Israel, Palestine, and now US coming into this conversation? Why should we care?
We should care because our very existence depends on certain rules being established and applied in the world, and on certain principles being upheld. Brings me back to the question of colonialism and decolonization. And the development since the Second World War, and especially culminating in the 1960s, of the concept of self-determination, that people have a right to define their own destiny. The principle of self-determination, which is the only thing that got us independence. We had to fight for that independence diplomatically, politically, at the United Nations and around the world, based on that principle alone, right? And that is the principle that is at stake in this whole war with Iran, with the Middle East, with the West Asia, with Palestine, right? That the people of Palestine are not being allowed to exercise their self-determination, their right to self-determination. We have to support that because we depend on that. Our very existence depends on that. And the history tells us that history doesn't repeat itself, but we need to learn from it, and aspects of it happen again and again, right? So the idea that a neighbor can use force to take your territory, that the neighbor can decide to move the people out of that territory and take it for itself, that isn't alien to us, that's very close to us. And that's what's happening in Palestine. There was, as I repeat, there was a country and Europeans, white people come and drive them off the land by murder and mass displacement and so on. Millions have been, and now they want to take away. It was 2.3 million, it's probably 2 million now, because it's 50,000, 55,000 killed. Everybody knows that's a joke. Everybody knows it's much higher than that. Most studies put it at between 200,000 and 300,000 people, right? And the objective is, it's not just a guess, they say it, that the objective is to get everybody out, to clean the land of that. That's not alien to us. That could happen to us.
So I gather that in
So
your,
the principles have to be held on to.
so I gather that in your view, Iran is well placed and well within its right to launch attacks against Israel for the sake of defending its sovereignty and that of its people.
Can I, this is law, you're talking law now. So when I talk law, you have to be exact, right? So I brought a little, a very short thing.
Sure.
The law, the United Nations Charter, right? Article 2, sub 4. All members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. That's the charter. That's what it says. We all belong to, even Israel belongs to the United Nations and must respect the charter, though it doesn't belong to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We haven't talked about that yet. We don't have time, probably. But that's the prohibition against aggression, right, and force. And then Article 51, because we've heard a lot from the beginning, Israel has a right to defend itself. It goes and murders children, and Israel has a right to defend itself. It becomes nauseating. And not only that, the leaders of Western countries, of these same colonial, the countries that colonized the world, the white crowd, they are saying, oh, right to defend. But even the media, the entire media almost is saying that, right? What is the truth about the right of self-defense? It's in the UN Charter. It says, Article 51, nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken the measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. I believe that's the only time in the whole UN Charter that the word self-defense is used. But there's what the law is. If an armed attack occurs,
Then
it
what?
tells you, I mean, who is legal and who is illegal. So Iran was attacked, an unprovoked attack. Unprovoked even to the extent of being within negotiations. Negotiations are going on and you attack that country. Yeah. You know, so that so-called self-defense is just a cover that they use, the Israelis use, the Zionist entity uses, but disturbingly, Western, so-called Western political leaders use, and worst of all, the media in the world, is the massive media. But of course, you know that this media is owned and controlled by a very few billionaires.
Yesterday, President Trump announced a ceasefire and the possibilities of a ceasefire. But since then, as Sabrina alluded to earlier, both Iran and Israel have fired off missiles. Do you believe this is sort of us approaching the end of this conflict between Israel and Iran, and what does this mean for the people of Palestine?
Well, I hope, and we all hope, I think, because the opposite is so disastrous for the world, right? We all hope that this thing will hold, that this ceasefire will hold, right? We're hoping that. But that's not the end. I mean, the real cause of the problem is this colony right there in the middle of and taking over the land of a people, right? Until that is solved, there will never be peace.
What's the solution there?
The solution is stop the colonization. So stop the occupation, right, of Palestine, stop the apartheid laws, right? Dismantle all the laws and all the systems that enforce that racist occupation, right? And have a nation, Palestine, from the river to the sea, that is free, democratic, independent.
You know,
Jew, Arab, no difference. Everybody the same. Because what we have now is an ethno-nationalist, which is a racist state.
yeah.
Saying only people of a certain so-called race. Now, we don't know, I mean, you know, race is just a construct, right? A social construct. But they use that to differentiate people, the racialization of the world, right? That has happened since
It
all
almost
this
feels far-reaching, though, Mr. Shoman, because every time or everything you hear on the media mentions nothing of that.
I know, but it's happening. It will happen. I have the faith that it will happen. It won't happen in my lifetime, but maybe in yours. Huh? You're a young
That's the
woman.
hope.
It'll happen in your lifetime, I think. And then maybe you call me and tell me yes.
Okay. What can we do? People here in Belize, trying to educate ourselves on what is taking place, consuming all the different information that is being put out, trying to piece together what is truth from fallacy. What can we do?
It's not easy. It's not easy. How do the mass of people in Belize get an alternative view? Back in the day, I don't know if it still happens, okay? I'm not here, and I know, but the creme evening thing, afterwards they play Democracy Now! Do they still do that?
I don't know.
We remember that, you know, they did it once.
Yeah.
That's an excellent source of information, right? A thing called Democracy Now! That's based in New York, I think, in the United States of America. That's a very, very good one. But I know most people now are
online.
They're
reading.
So there are very good podcasts. There are very good people that you can
sources
follow
that you can
and
gather
listen.
information.
Yeah, but they need guidance. So somebody like you, and yourself, I think it would be useful if you started giving hints to people of certain podcasts that they could learn things from, right? You might not do it online, but you could do it in your own media thing and so on, and try and find ways to get people to open their eyes. That's what you're supposed to be here about, you know, and really open their eyes by first of all realizing that you're being fed a bunch of lies.
What concerns you
by
most
the main
about
media.
this recent escalation?
You went like that because it's relief. Relief is what I feel, right? That it didn't explode. It didn't go further than it did. And the hope that will hold. But the realization that there will never be peace until the colonial situation is resolved, until there is real decolonization. Just like in any of our countries, in Africa, in Asia, there would never have been peace. Don't forget that the great British Empire that some people are so proud to be a part of, you know, so when our people are given the OBE, Officer of the British Empire, up to today, they feel nice, they feel proud, and everybody clap for them, you know. Don't forget that they are mass murderers too, you know. How many millions did they kill? British colonialism and English colonialism. First of all, in Ireland, that's where they started, and they practiced everything, including what Israel is doing now, you know, the starvation thing. They did that in Ireland. They killed, I think, around 1 million people.
There are dark histories all over the world. Yeah.
And
Still
then what
taking
they've done in
place.
India, in Africa, everywhere. And it's still taking place, exactly. And then you have a country like Burkina Faso now trying to stand up, right? We all look to and admire and hope for the best there. You have hero countries like the Houthis, the only country that has really stood up for international law in a practical way.
Excellent.
International law.
Well, Mr. Shoman, we are out of time.
Okay.
Yes, but this has been an enlightening conversation.
Yeah, always.
And so we always want to thank you for joining us on set to bring these perspectives on these hot button issues. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank
sir.
you too. Thank you. And good luck.
At this time, we take a quick break, but don't go anywhere because when we come back, the conversation switches into unlocking young minds with STEAM this summer.